Hello, everyone. Welcome to the SavvyCast. This is Jamie, and whether you are listening to the podcast or watching on YouTube, thank you for taking time to join us today. I am very, very excited about today's episode, and excited is not really the appropriate term because this is going to be a very heavy topic, but it's something that I'm thrilled to be able to invite someone to speak about something that is such an important topic as abusive relationships. And my guest today is an advocate for those who are victims of abuse, but on many levels, she is someone who has so much to offer. I would like to welcome, first of all, Julie Cantrell. Julie, welcome to the SavvyCast.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here, Jamie. Thank you for the time. Truly.
Well, Julie, I first want to just tell everyone that you come with so many qualifications on so many levels. You are a multiple award-winning novelist, and you are a New York Times, USA Today bestselling author. You are a TEDx speaker. I watched your TEDx talk. My goodness, it was amazing. And what leads us to your being my guest today is you are not only a literacy advocate, but you're an advocate for survivors of domestic abuse. And thank you for being here today to talk about that important topic.
Thank you.
And before we jump into the topic, just as an icebreaker, as I ask all of my guests, can you share with us what you would choose as your last meal?
This is a hard question, actually, Jamie, because narrowing down food is hard for me. I love food. I love life and people and food. And I'm from Louisiana, so we don't have a problem eating. I would probably choose a huge, collection of vegetables, Brussels sprouts, just sauteed vegetables. I love fresh garden vegetables. That's my favorite thing in the world to eat. Mm-hmm. Squash, zucchini, fresh Brussels sprouts, tomatoes, all of that. That would be my favorite thing in the world.
I think I'm right there with you. Now, I would probably have buttered cornbread on the side. I would have all the veggies too. Let me just start, Julie, by introducing how I got connected with you. And this will set the stage for what we're about to talk about. We have almost everyone has probably been following the very tragic situation with Gabby Petito and Brian Laundrie, which has ended in a very sad way and is still going on with trying to find him. But when you posted something, I believe, on your personal Facebook, and it was important lessons learned from Gabby and Brian. And it is 30 points of very important information about abusive relationships. And it went viral. And I have we have a mutual friend who reached out to me and she said, I want to connect you two because I know your heart is to share this kind of thing. And you were so gracious, Julie. You're extremely busy on many levels. For everyone listening or watching, I just ask that if you think there's anyone who needs this, share it. Share the podcast, share the YouTube. And Julie, I'm going to link to every way to get in touch with you. So this will be something that can be easily disseminated and shared. So thank you.
Thank you.
So Julie, I've got so many questions and I'm just going to jump right in and you're going to do most of the talking, but there's so many questions. And I think what I want to start with is, can you just define domestic abuse? And does that entail, is it just married? Is it dating? Is it cohabitation? Yeah. Just give us a picture of what that is.
I'm so glad you asked it that way because I actually don't even like the term domestic abuse, even though that's what we use. And that's how the statistics break down. Mm-hmm. Because to me, it minimizes the severity of the real word abuse. It is violence. It is abuse, no matter who it's happening to. But if it happens to a stranger, we take it more seriously. If it happens within an interpersonal relationship, we seem to just look over it and say, oh, it takes two, or that's not my business, or we don't need to get involved in that, or that's between them. And that puts a lot of very innocent people in a very vulnerable position and leads to a lot of violence and and suffering that we could prevent if we looked at it and thought about it in a different way. So I actually wish we would just start saying abuse and violence. And I know that it's necessary to track the statistics and all of that, but it does seem to me to minimize it a little bit.
Well, and when I saw that, and I don't even know if you had, because okay, and here it has survivors of domestic violence, and I think that's very appropriate, because even if it doesn't end as it did with Gabby, violence it's not acceptable.
Yes. And unfortunately, a lot of times we will, if somebody ends up with a broken bone or a black eye, sometimes people will pay more attention to that than all of the psychological cycles that take place before it escalates to physical violence, which usually in the textbook cases, we see a long longitudinal, slide of abuse before it becomes violent. Unfortunately, a lot of times in our culture, we don't really, I don't want to say we don't care, but we don't speak up or intervene until oftentimes there's a body. And then we all go, well, what happened? We never knew anything was wrong. Why didn't she leave him? Or we start making excuses for the abuser, or we start blaming the victim. And we still can't seem as a culture to get our heads around these very predictable and discernible patterns that have been studied now and researched and documented that are parallel across all forms of abuse when it goes to like the sociopathic, psychopathic level. And that could be whether people are doing sexual abuse, abuse within the family systems, partner on partner violence, that kind of thing. If we learn these patterns and these red flags and learn what to look out for, just think of all the innocent people we can protect and save. But instead, we kind of go into that place of denial and think it's never going to happen to us. And then it does. 3 women a day are killed by their partners in this country alone.
Oh my, 3 women a day.
3 women a day. And that doesn't count all of the men, women, and help me, non-binary people.
So that's just the statistics for men killing their wives.
Men killing their female partners, 3 a day. And that does not include all the ones on the run or in hiding or suffering in silence inside the home with no way out, or the ones who have gotten away and found freedom. So we're just looking at body counts there, and only the women.
Okay. Well, I'm a mom of three girls.
Yep.
And a lot of my friends, or almost all of my friends, have either sons or daughters.
Yep.
And for years, over a decade, I have sat back and watched dating relationships in high school. And I have shook my head and said, what are these parents thinking? Allowing their daughters to date someone who's exhibiting this kind of behavior. Now, young men in high school are immature as it is, but then when you see signs, and I'm not educated about all this, but you mentioned something in here, and I took notes, and you said that a lot of these dysfunctional relationships start in the teen years. So can you speak to that? Because I don't know that this is as accurate as you would be able to tell someone, but I tell my daughters, if you see anger, if you see control, if you ever see rage, leave. Don't just stop. It's not going to get better. Can you address, just from that vantage point, women with daughters, and I know men can be abused, just what would you say to parents of kids who are dating and they're starting to make these connections and go on dates and build these relationships? Speak to that.
Definitely. I do see a pattern that whether it starts in the teens or the early adult years are just people with emotional immaturity. So, not fully developed emotional skills, coping skills to deal with anxiety and stress. That can be an issue. There's all different reasons why abuse happens. And so sometimes it is someone who just doesn't have coping skills to deal with their anger or their emotions, and they take it out on the easiest target. And those kind of abusers, I believe, can be taught coping skills and anger management skills and learn better relationship skills and move on. What I want people to really be, and that's very important that we all learn that and help our children grow emotionally, as well as all the other milestones we're trying to teach them along the
Mhm.
way. You know, that's something we haven't really put a lot of focus on, emotional intelligence as a culture, but it's starting to
Mhm.
change for both male and female,
Mhm.
sons and daughters, which is good. But even more dangerous are those the patterns of it's almost like bullies who never grow up. And so we can
Oh.
see those kind of bullies on the school playground, right? And we know how they kind of find a target and they hone in on that target, and they will just mercilessly pound away at that target until that target is eroded completely. And it doesn't matter what that target does in response. They can walk away, they can fight back, they can hide, they can report the problem. Nothing is going to stop that bully until a circle of people surround that target and stand up to that bully and say, no more. We stand with this person. You have to stop, because we're not going to tolerate this as a people, as a community, as a circle, as a tribe. And that's what we fail to do. We can see it happening in children, but then we forget that these bullies grow up and they're still the same. They still bully, and they find better ways to hide it from the public and keep it behind closed doors and hone in on one target who they've built trust and love and relationship with. And they slowly devour that person. But if that target can find a circle around them, of support, which is what you're saying, if the parents can pay closer attention to who their sons and daughters are dating and what's going on. Now, we can't necessarily stop our teenagers from getting into relationships. We all would if we could. And we can't really.
And the older they get, the harder it is. Yeah.
It is hard. And you wouldn't believe the letters I get from parents every day saying, I'm trying so hard to get my daughter out of this, and I don't know how to get her out. And she's shut me out because she doesn't want to hear what I'm saying.
Mhm.
It's real. It's very real. And abusers are very, very good at alienating the healthy people out of the target's life. They will find a way to turn the target against all of the healthy friends and relatives and loved ones in their life who are trying to speak truth to them.
They'll get them isolated.
They will isolate them, and they will make the target, they will flip reality so that the target believes the abuser is the truth sayer. The abuser is the protector. And the people who are really seeing and telling the truth and trying to protect them are the manipulators. I mean, it's so psychological and it's so dark and so deep, but it's a gradual slide. And that's why it's important to see the red flags on the front end before we get to the point where people are so lost in the spin and the fog and the real danger and sometimes homicidal danger, like Gabby. We have to stop it on the front end.
Right. May I ask you, you mentioned the bully that starts young. Do you feel like most bullies are abused at home?
There are a lot of unanswered questions when it comes to abuse. We actually just started real research on domestic violence in the 80s. And only in recent years have they really started looking at patterns, not only of trauma wounds and how we process trauma. And when I say trauma, I mean psychological, emotional trauma,
Mm-hmm.
and how if we can't heal that pain, we sometimes push it onto other people.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I was saying. There are people who just don't have the coping mechanisms or the emotional intelligence to deal with their own wounding. And so they hurt other people as a response. I don't believe those people are incapable of being healed or incapable of having a healthier life. I think they just need our help and support too. But the danger is when especially if people, a lot of targets are very empathetic people, naturally the helpers and the empaths of the world who look at everybody and only see the good, and look at anybody from any broken situation and think, I can outlove that hurt. I can outlove that hate. I can fix that hole.
Yeah.
And so it keeps you in this relationship, especially when you're a young girl, especially when you're a young girl in the South, and especially when you're a young girl in Christian circles in the South.
Oh, wow. Mm-hmm.
And we can go really deep there if
Yes.
you want to, but there's a lot of conditioning that keeps young women in very unhealthy situations because we've learned to worship the relationship or the marriage or the family more than we care about the safety of that soul. We care more about the marriage than we care about the woman's soul.
Yes.
And that's what we have to flip.
Okay. Not to get into the Enneagram, but you said helper. That is a 2. And I have a daughter who's a 2.
That's me.
Oh, you're a 2. Okay.
I'm a true 2.
Okay. I am an 8. And I called my best friend today, who is a 2. And I said, help me come up with good questions for Julie, because this would never happen to me. I would have somebody slamming the door behind them before they even got started. Cause I'm an 8, I'm a challenger. I'm not easily abused, but she said, Jamie, you've got to realize that, we see the best, we want to help, we make excuses. So I think that is one of the first points that you made that's super important, is to know yourself.
Yes.
Know your tendencies and how you make factual observations or judgments about others. Yes. And then how you allow them to interact with you in your world. And that's important. Add to it the Southern element and the Christian element. And yes, you have a toxic cocktail. Can you just address that? Because everyone listening is not Southern, nor are they Christian.
Right.
But can you just sort of address what you mean by that?
I will. And I don't at all mean to imply that only Southern Christian women are the ones being abused. I know you realize that. I want to make that clear. These are it's just, as you said, a perfect cocktail. And it happens in lots of situations and lots of systems. Abusers cannot abuse. I mean, there are cases where there's strange cases where they're isolated, whatever. There's always an exception. We know that. Yeah. But in most situations, abusers are able to abuse and continue long-term abuse because there is a system of abuse around them. There are enablers and there are what we call flying monkeys. And then the target becomes the scapegoat. There's a whole system. And if you read about narcissistic systems, and I'm hesitant to use the term narcissist because it's so overused in society right now. Everybody has some narcissistic traits. We all do. It's part of actually being healthy, but there's a spectrum there, and it can go all the way to narcissistic personality disorder, which is also known, or antisocial disorder, which is also known as sociopathy, or all the way to psychopathy. So
is borderline in there?
Yeah, there's a dark triad, and that's all, like I said, kind of newly being researched in the last few decades. And there's a lot of questions about whether people are born this way or made this way, or, there's a lot of unknowns. But what is known now and has been known for a while is the very predictable pattern. And so when you talk about the importance of knowing ourselves, the problem is, how many of us as teenagers really know ourselves? I mean, we don't. We're figuring it out, which is one reason why it's really not a good idea for young teenagers to get involved in serious relationships yet. It's fine to have crushes, and you're not going to be able to stop that. But when you form a lifelong bond as a 13, 14, 15-year-old child, you don't even know who you are yet. And then neither does your partner. And so it's kind of a perfect storm there anyway. Now, some of those relationships grow into beautiful, lifelong relationships and the closest bonds in the world because the couples grow together in healthy ways. But what we saw in Gabby and Brian's case, for example, one of them was outgrowing the other. And I believe, and I can only make speculations because this case is still under investigation, but based on everything I've seen play out in countless cases and the patterns that I've observed, this falls into that textbook pattern. And it seems to me that he was losing control of a piece of her life. And abusers want total control. And when you talk about Southern young women in the Christian circles, I grew up Southern Baptist, have a deep, deep faith. It's a very important part of my life. I'm no longer Baptist, but whether intentionally or not, the messages that I learned from my church system, which had many positives and wonderful people, I'm not bashing a specific denomination or any faith or anything like that. Yeah. But as a girl, over and over again, whether consciously or subconsciously, I absorbed the message that a good Christian wife submits and supports her husband at all cost. You take that vow to love and honor till death do you part, and it is a vow you take with God, and you do not shame your husband or blame your husband. You support him at all. He is the spiritual leader of the family. He can easily, in those circumstances, become the God of the family system. Mm-hmm. And the family can be, as I said earlier, what we worship. And where does the woman fit in that if she's being abused or targeted by an unhealthy person? So the church doesn't allow room for that narrative. And if a lot of women who turn to their church for support are told things like God hates divorce, forgive 70, all of these verses that are used, which I consider spiritual abuse. What we forget is that woman was sent here by God with a soul by God too. And that woman has a life to live and a purpose to fulfill too. And by reducing her and diminishing her and keeping her trapped in a dangerous, dangerous system where she is may be in danger of her life, but definitely in danger of losing her spirit. We're not doing the work of God in those situations. And yet the woman comes to believe that that's the godly thing to do, to stay, to support at all costs, even if it cost her life. And time again, we see that as the result.
Well, and I grew up in a very similar faith with many good things, but where you're taught your only biblical grounds for divorce is adultery and forgive and so forth and so on. But to that point, I've always told my daughters, other than choosing whether you're going to become a Christian, the second most important decision you will ever make is who you marry, because all of that, who wants to even have to figure all of that out? And we have just always said, and they are blessed with the kindest dad. I mean, my girls have seen what you should aspire to in a husband. And I mean, wow. But many girls have not seen that, and they don't know any better than maybe what they grew up with, or maybe they don't even feel like they deserve anything. So what I would like to start with, would you speak to every young woman out there who is not married yet, and also to all the moms who have daughters and dads who might be listening, things to tell them for a potential abuser?
Yes. And as you said, this can be generational patterns because our normal is our normal. And so whatever we know of love is what we know of love. And so if we haven't had a model of healthy, safe, beautiful, supportive love, when someone is abusive to us, we think that's love. That's all we know of love. And
can you repeat that one more time?
When we've had an unhealthy model of love in our family systems,
you think that's what love is?
That's what we know as love. And so when someone comes to us with a healthier love, we don't quite know how to accept that as love. We aren't sure. It doesn't feel right to us. It doesn't plug into that slot we know as love. And so when we meet an abusive person who comes in and behaves the same way we've seen models of love, displayed, it fits that slot. And so we think it's love. So it's not always easy for someone to see or notice unhealthy patterns, because to them, it's the norm. It's all they've ever known. And so thank you for asking, what would be abnormal? What would be unhealthy? In my opinion, as a mother, if I saw my children bring home or interacting with a partner because that's really the only time we can kind of intervene when they're young.
Right.
I would watch for highly emotional displays. So let's say an unhealthy relationship, a girl might be on the phone crying every day when she's talking to that guy, or constantly explaining herself and defending herself, constantly trying to prove to him that she's not cheating on him, not being allowed to go places with her friends without him involved, pulling her away socially from the activities she's involved in, the friends that she's involved in. You'll see her withdraw more and more, and he becomes her whole world. And he ends up kind of really shadowing and controlling almost everything she does. She can't make a decision without asking him. She can't do anything without his approval. She has to check in with him about everything. And he's constantly upsetting her and making her feel like nothing she does is right. It's all wrong, no matter what she does. If you looked at that video of Gabby, you could see she was an absolute wreck. I mean, she was at her end psychologically, emotionally. She was breaking. And our typical first, reaction as a culture was to think she was crazy. She was the problem. We need to stop and ask ourselves, what has pushed her to the point of breakdown? And usually it's because you're trying so hard to please someone who will never give you that affirmation or that acceptance or that love that you're trying so hard to earn from them. And you're jumping through every hoop in the world they keep putting in front of you. And you cannot get the love that you're trying so desperately to get from them, or the approval or the safety. That punishment will come in a lot of different ways, whether it's emotional, spiritual, or physical. It could be financial. He was controlling the money in that situation. He was driving her van, but he was controlling it. I mean, that everything can go into the control of the abuser. It's a lot of things to look for sure. And again, abuse can go both ways. Girls can do it too. What we tend to use the male-female dynamic when we talk about abuse, because that's usually the ones that escalate to physical violence and homicide. The statistics definitely show that. So while women can definitely be emotionally or psychologically abusive, not as many women are physically violent or lead to homicide in those kind of cases.
Okay. Now, one thing you said is if your daughter is crying all the time, could it be things that are seemingly excused or overlooked, like just being rude, even
Yes.
things like maybe dating someone else and, cheating on you? Is that, does that fit into the category? Because
Yes. I mean, cheaters are cheaters, right? Like there are a lot of us who move through the world and would never cheat or lie to anybody. We just don't have it in us to do it. It's showing us what their moral compass is. It's showing us what their character is. And yes, they're young and they're going to do things and make mistakes and all of that. But once somebody shows you what their moral makeup is and what they're capable, if they're capable of living a double life or lying to you or being someone different to you than they are to someone else, I mean, and it's not just interpersonal relationships romantically. It's that whole mean girl syndrome too. Choose your friends carefully. Choose the people in your inner circle very carefully. When we meet, when you were talking about know yourself, it's also important to realize that not everybody in the world moves through the world like we do. When we're young, we assume everybody sees the world like we do.
right.
And we don't assume that somebody might not have our best interest at heart, that they might actually be jealous or vengeful or bitter or abusers, these things that could hurt us. So it's very important for young people to realize who to let into their inner circle, and that some people are trying to elevate you and push you toward the light, like I talked about in the TED Talk, and some people are trying to push us toward the dark. And we have to learn that discernment, and it takes time to learn that. But that's why we turn to our parents and our mentors and the adults that we trust in life to help us figure that out. The problem is when we're in unhealthy situations where even our parents haven't learned to discern the difference between healthy and unhealthy relationships, we don't have a model of that clear line between what's good and what's not good for us. So we as a culture need to shift to make that very clear for our next generations, because these statistics are escalating. We're going the wrong direction. Right. And we can make a difference. We can stop situations like Gabby and Brian from happening if we pay attention
and decide to get involved, even if it's not personally affecting us.
Yes.
Now, let me ask you, just before we move to the next one, you mentioned earlier that maybe anger, because you don't have the coping skills, you think people can be trained out of that. We've always taught our girls, and tell me if we're wrong, because we've been so adamant about it, but we've said, if you see an anger in someone that's pretty regular, and if you see the way they treat waitresses, people they don't know, but that they consider, just the way they treat children, we have always said, if you see anger or disrespect, end it, because that's who they are. That's who they are. And I am a firm believer in you can regenerate, you can become a new person. But you said something, and I think it was at the very end, and I want to say this, and we'll circle back to it. Personally, I have never heard of one abusive relationship that became healthier. Not one. Not with therapy, not with church, not with prayer or forgiveness. And I do believe that is another element of growing up in the South and growing up in the church. You think you can pray away you can't pray away anything from someone else. Only they can do that work with God. And oh my goodness, I see it. And I see things being glossed over. Well, he goes to church camp. He does this. He's a counselor here. And I just want someone who really knows to speak to those people and just sound the clarion call of what the reality likely is.
It's very easy, especially once you love someone and care about someone, and you can see nobody's all bad. So even you take the worst abuser in the world and you can find something good and redeeming in them. And so if we love that person, it's easy to focus on the goods, overlook the bad, cling to the good moments, forgive the bad moments. And you just keep holding on thinking, we can get through this. He'll grow up. He'll figure out how to manage his anger. He'll figure out how to love better. He just didn't learn it as a child, or those kind of things. It's not going to work. if they go off on their own and decide on their own to become a better person and learn better coping, so that's fine, but you're never going to be able to do that for them. And staying only allows them to treat you worse and worse and worse over time. And it does get worse and worse and worse over time. It really does. Now, I'm sure there are exceptions. I have never seen one, never. And a lot of the professionals I've spoken to and worked with have never seen one ever. So I just don't think once a relationship is toxic to that degree, that it's going to get better. I 100% agree with you. If someone is mean to anybody, can treat anybody without respect, or any living being, cruelty to animals is another sign of there's something wrong. There's something missing in them if they're able to throw that hate and hurt onto another living being for no reason, because they've been slighted or they can't deal with their own stuff internally. They don't have the right to hurt another living being, period. And I just don't want to see another innocent person destroyed because we don't step in and say, this is not okay. This is not how we treat one another in a society. You have to either figure out how to fix your issues. We're not going to tolerate you in these relationships with people in our healthy society. It just can't work. We can't keep leaving vulnerable people up for, to be devoured.
So what would you say to, let's say, parents of teens, they're starting to date, and you see maybe your daughter, someone's zeroing in on them, and you see, I don't want that. And then you try to pull it away. And then the other person even comes in and moves in even harder.
Yeah.
Do you just pull out all the stops to end something in the beginning, because it's only going to get worse, especially when you still have enough control? You've got the car keys, you pay for the cell phone, you can take all that away. I mean, I know it gets super complex, but when you see something, and as an adult with discernment, do you just pretty much try to zero in at the beginning and say, I see signs, we have got to stop this now?
I think every case is so different. Every personality is different. Every family system is different. So what might break through to one teenager, and that daughter will say, oh, you know what? You're right, Mom. Thank you for telling me. The next teenager will run away with the guy, so there's no perfect answer to how to prevent these toxic relationships from forming and from stabilizing. The key is that we have all of these discussions before that person ever enters their path, so that they know what to watch for as they're forming those very early conversations with that person who's honing in on them. The abusers know who to target. They know how to find the good, trusting, kind, tolerant, forgiving, empathetic souls of the world. They're not going to go find another fellow bully and make them their target, because that'll give it right back to them. It's never going to work. They're going to find...
Most abusers aren't going to go for an Enneagram 8.
They're probably not.
They're not going to go there. They're going to go
they
for
find
the
twos.
Oh, no. Woo.
It's true. Yeah. So it's, and know, like you said, know yourself and know what your vulnerabilities are. As a 2 now, I know, but I didn't know all of that. As a young woman, I didn't know anything about the Enneagram. I didn't know anything about personalities. I didn't know that everybody didn't think like I did. And so it put me in some vulnerable situations along the way. I think that happens to a lot of people.
Are there any other warning signs that we need to know of someone who we can say, oh my goodness, they're going to be an abuser if something doesn't happen?
Well, and again, there are, toxic mixes too. Like I've had a couple of people tell me, well, I'm not an abuser anymore, but they're with a different person and they've grown and they've spent time, doing a lot of work on themselves and that kind of thing. So I'm not saying, especially as a person of faith, I believe people can be redeemed. What I've learned is that we can't stick it out for the long run and wait for that to happen, because we may lose our lives. Our children may lose their lives. We're putting our children at risk. Like you said, the biggest decision we ever make is who we're going to marry and who we're going to have children with. Because once you're locked in with children, it's a whole different dynamic trying to get out. It's a whole different dynamic. And they have control over those kids in most situations, and they will use the children as pawns. So, look at their family systems. Like you said, in the South, we know a lot about the families. Look at it does matter. I don't want to, you don't want to judge people for where they come from and all of that. You want to give everybody the benefit of the doubt. But if they're displaying some of those same toxic behaviors that you see in their family system, if their family system is enabling those dysfunctional behaviors, and rewarding the unhealthy behaviors while trying to, you can see that happening in systems. You see families who try to keep their children low down and broken and angry and violent.
Mhm.
And, you see it.
Yeah.
And those patterns matter. They really do.
Well, I want to ask you because here in one of your points, you talk about Petito laundry, blaming Petito and calling her crazy. And then you said, and I saw this as well, he's charming and comes across as loving and loyal, joking, very confident. Would you say that if someone maybe even in the teen years who, doesn't have a job, doesn't contribute to society, just plays sports or goes to school, if there's someone who is almost more charming than seems right, is that a signal?
The best manipulators are incredibly charming, and it's a skill that they develop over time. So they get better and better and better at it. And that's why I say it's the bullies who grow up. They've shown signs of that kind of behavior at some point in their lives in a public way, or lost jobs over it, or lost relationships over it in the past. And they learn from each failure how to be a little smoother, a little more discreet, a little bit more keeping that mask on, except behind closed doors to the person that they're targeting. They learn how to play people as pawns. They learn how to fool their target into believing. We saw Gabby. The first thing Gabby did when she was pulled over was say, she's apologizing. She's saying she has severe anxiety. So she's declaring herself, mentally ill. Mm-hmm. And she's apologizing for being mean to Brian. But when we later got the information from the 911 call, we knew that it was Brian hitting her. And we knew that she had just been heard publicly saying, why do you have to be so mean to him? But by the time that cop pulled her over, reality had flipped.
Wow.
And she was taking all of the blame for his behaviors. That's what targets do when they're so psychologically manipulated. These manipulators know very well what they're doing, and it is intentional, is very intentional, and they're very charming. So when I hear people say he's the nicest guy in the room, I take a second look. Yeah. Because sometimes the nicest guy in the room behind closed doors is a monster. And that doesn't mean all nice people are not truly nice.
No.
And we don't want to become that jaded in life. We want to be able to assume the best, but be careful. Be careful.
Well, and I just, and maybe my terminology isn't the best, but I've told my daughter, I feel like I can spot things, but when someone is a smooth operator at 14, 15, 16, and almost approaches an adult mom as, just, there's just something that I think I can sniff out and, but let me ask you this. There was a movie years ago, Sleeping with the Enemy.
Yep.
Did you say that? Is that accurate? My husband and I have watched that numerous times. Would you say, he was a doctor, pillar of society. No one had a clue, but when they were at home, totally different scenario. Is that typical, or was that cinematography? Was that just
happens drama? Every day? Happens every day. The one thing about abuse that we don't like to admit is that it can happen to people like us, and does happen to people like us. It happens across every barrier: race, gender, religion, socioeconomic level, education level, all of it, ethnicity. It is worldwide. It is a true pattern. We definitely have people among us at all levels who are dangerous. And we need to realize that. We need to realize that our children are vulnerable to those people. And that could be in our own family systems, their own school systems, their own work systems, their own, there are people like that in every system. We just need to know what to watch for. I haven't seen the film in years, but I do remember very vividly one scene. And I was talking about this the other day with a friend. The only scene I remember, and I was young when I watched it, but she came in, she had finally gotten away. She was free. She was at this beach house, and she was starting a new life and done everything right. Right. And most targets just want to have the right to live free of danger and free of fear. They don't want revenge. They're not trying to hurt anybody. They just want them and their kids to be safe. That's all that anybody wants. And everybody should have the right to that. Everybody, no matter what. She gets there, and we don't see him we don't see graphic violence happening. What we see is she opens the cabinet and he's done something with the cans.
He was OCD and he had everything in exact order.
So you see how he's manipulating her mind. He didn't have to hit her to elicit that incredible fear and have absolute control and power over her in that moment. All he did was move some cans in the cabinet. But that was enough to make every viewer go, chills up our spines, right? Because we knew in that moment he was the predator, she was the prey, he had control, and there was nothing she could do. That's how abusers mess with your head. They really manipulate you psychologically long before. Some of them don't even have to touch you. They don't even have to leave a bruise or a broken bone or put a gun to your head. They are so good at the mastermind, manipulation, that they control every aspect of your being without ever laying a hand on you.
Okay. Can I just ask you this? Because I listened to, and this was a few years ago, I listened to, I believe it was a podcast about the Michael Jackson situation.
Mm-hmm.
And what was so stunning was how he, through seemingly generosity, had those parents willingly sending their sons to stay with him, and they would get another room, and because they thought, look, he's this, he's so kind, he's so meek. Would you say that whether it is sexual abuse, physical abuse, that all abusers manipulate through something that would be good in a normal person, like generosity, kindness?
Yes.
Okay. So they are distorting honestly good things.
Yes. They're taking advantage of the fact that normally healthy people move through the world, and we move through the world based on trust. And seeing good in people and, assuming that someone's telling us the truth when they're talking to us. Right. And so they build trust. They build trust based on normal values and normal human relationships. But their trust, in their mind, it's all just a move on a chessboard. They're just orchestrating. They have a long-term goal, and they're always 10 steps ahead of the target that they're trying to play. And they put a whole system into place. So we might doubt one man who shows up, building trust and saying, why don't you let your little boy come spend the night with me and you get a hotel room down the hall? We might not buy into that. But Michael Jackson had a whole system of enablers around him, making him look legit, making him look like a good guy. Oh, he's so good with kids. He just loves kids. He loves to treat kids because it's, that's his charity or his specialty. Same thing with, let's say, a preacher or a Boy Scout leader, whatever, all these people that were shocked when we see, the truth come out at different times about certain people. And we're like, oh, he was such a good guy. I've trusted him for 20 years. But that's part of their plan, to build, to marry a really good person. So people assume that spouse wouldn't be with him if he wasn't good, and then it enables him to abuse her or children or other people in his life. Because why would he have those good people around him if he was a bad guy, right? But usually the people around him are being played too. They don't know. They don't let people see the true them until it's an end game. And then they take their mask off. And once you see the real them, you're done. I mean, that's when your life is in real danger. That's when you truly are going to be killed or have to leave everything behind to survive.
Okay. So I want you to speak to that point, because you've had it in here, but you said, you just said the end game when they take the mask off.
Yep.
So what obviously happened with Brian and Gabby is this went on from the teen years to what we just saw, and we see how it ended. Now, first, I want to ask you, does every abuser, if he or she takes the mask off, is every one of those capable of actual murder? Or is it just something that's dramatic, like not just killing someone, but maybe setting a house on fire or just doing something dramatic to hurt the person, the victim?
Again, every abuser is different, and there's a spectrum of abusers like anything else. And so, I'm speaking to the most extreme situations, but in a lot of cases, it will slide and escalate until it becomes so extreme that, something's got to give. And what that is can end in, like you said, a house being burned down or someone being murdered or just horrible situations. Somebody killing the kids because they don't want to lose the kids in a custody. We see these kind of things playing out all the time. When they feel like they've lost control of the situation, they're not going to go for that. They're going to,
and then they don't care who in
they
the
don't care who.
city, the community, the church. It's all games off. It's
right. Yeah. And in fact, if you notice, like, I mean, and I'm going to use the most extreme situation here, but let's talk about psychopaths, like if serial killers or whatever, or let's say Brian actually gets caught. We don't know where he is right now, if he's alive or where he is. A lot of times when they do get caught, if they truly are sociopaths or psychopaths, they actually, you can see the smirk on their face when they get caught. They feel like they've outsmarted the world. They feel proud that they kept us all running and scrambling and trying to figure out. They were ahead of us. They were 10 steps ahead of us the whole time. They knew stuff we didn't know. They had power. They were pulling our strings the whole way. They love to be puppet masters. So really, they don't even, like, in the end, they know they're bad. They know that eventually they're going to either get caught or they'll get away with it for the rest of their life. But if they do get caught, they don't have the same conscience that we have. It's all about power and control and feeling powerful and in control of people, of other lives. It's so hard to comprehend, isn't it? Because we just don't move through the world that way.
Well, and then you even just look at Brian, if you just had a picture of him and then you think he actually killed that beautiful, beautiful girl. He killed her. I mean, it's just it's just mind blowing that
you wouldn't look, and especially I have a son about his age. So you look at him and your first instinct is to feel sorry for him. Like, they're trying their best. They're young. They're at their end. They're stressed. It's very easy to feel compassion for both people involved, both families involved. And that's healthy. That's a normal human feeling, to look and care about all involved. But then you have to step back and think, okay, but she was in real danger. Real danger. And none of us recognized it in her circles. I'm speaking, or maybe they did. And, there's all different things that play there. But no one, I don't think, would have ever thought he was capable of killing her. And that's why every time there's a body, we all go, oh my goodness, I never realized it was that dangerous, or I never knew she had it that bad, or he was such a nice guy. I never knew he could have done something like that. We underestimate how dangerous some people really are. And that's what keeps us in those relationships way too long.
And can you, I know we are pressing on time, that you have another appointment, but can you quickly, you said that we all need to know these terms. Can you just let me fire these terms off and you give us a definition where we can speak intelligently and understand when we're reading about these things?
I'll do my best.
Okay. That one is trauma bonds. Trauma bonds.
Trauma bonds. I think of it almost like a casino and a jackpot, and you sit there and you're putting your little money in the slots, right? And we know the casino is going to win. In the end, the house always wins, but we're hooked because we might get that jackpot on this next pull. A bad relationship is like that. I'm going to keep trying. Now, I know this might not work, and this might hurt me, and this might take something from me, and this might cost me. But if I keep putting my quarter in that slot, I might get the end result that I want. But if we zoom out and look at the great big picture, it's never going to benefit us. The house is always going to win. The abuser's always going to win. But they keep us chasing that little reward. And every now and then, randomly, they'll drop it to us. So it keeps us hooked. It keeps us bonded. So we keep trying to get that reward again, but there's no mind or rhyme or reason to it. There's no rational way to get the next reward. It's all random. It's all their manipulation to keep us putting money in the slot, to keep us locked into that and invested into that relationship.
So maybe the abused, let's say female, who's crying most of the time, not treated well, but then every now and then he'll shower her with flowers, take her to a nice restaurant. So it's just enough of the good.
Exactly.
Okay.
And then she thinks it's all the bad is because of something she's doing. If she can figure out what she's doing wrong, then they'll be good all the time.
Then it'll change and
they'll always be good. Yeah. But she's got to figure out what she's doing wrong. But in reality, she's not doing anything wrong. He's abusing her intentionally and doing it on purpose. Okay.
Well, it is that abusive cycle. So that's basically what you just described. It's just
the abusive cycle. Well, it's you have a ramping up of tension and then you'll have a big explosion of some big thing will happen that'll just wreck her. And she'll feel like, I can't get through another day like this. She falls into tears, or he hits her, or, he breaks something, or he chokes her or threatens her, or, something bad happens. She collapses. She realizes, I can't do this anymore. And then the storm kind of passes. He's sorry, or he starts being calm again. And she thinks, okay, we've been through the worst of it. Now we can just be good again. It's not that big of a deal. It's like, you just find the good and you keep on. And then the cycle repeats itself. And in between, like you said, you might get a gift, you might get a reward, you might get some kindness, you might get, a vacation, you might get whatever, like these little things that validate that your relationship is real, that he really loves you, he really cares, he's really sorry, but he's just waiting for the next chance to hurt you.
Mm-mm. Okay. Wow. All right. Emotional intelligence. And we know that that's it's hard to just say, hey, take a test, but it's something that we can pretty much tell. Like, how would you define that and what we need to know about it?
Kind of a new term. There's some researchers and some research centers taking that focus on this highly, but there are books about it. Mm-hmm. It's definitely, we have kind of forgotten that when we look at human intelligence and all of the different developmental milestones, we look at physical milestones, language milestones, fine motor, gross motor, all these milestones we're trying to achieve in our children with their development. And we forget that emotional development is just as important. And I believe spiritual development too. So to me, those are two components that really need to be a very, if not the most important aspect of our focus on child development. And I think that needs to be included in school curriculums and family systems and church systems and everybody who helps mentor children as they're growing up, so that we know, as you said, before they get to those teenage years and are practicing these different relationships, they already know what is a healthy person in their life and what isn't, and what to look out for.
Can you is there, and there may not be something, but let's just say there's even a young adult, someone in college who's dating someone who's not abusive, but how would you say to judge that person's emotional intelligence? And if they're not abusive, maybe they're a little immature, but is that a matter of something to be concerned about as we're concerned about this?
Well, it may not lead to homicide, but I think, as you said, when we're choosing our lifetime partner, it's the most important decision we make. And you want to find someone who's not only in sync with you, but has the same ambition and drive to continue to grow and develop and elevate one another. As we said, there will be people who want to keep you down because they don't want you to get higher than them. And if that's the kind of level they're at, where they have to be on top and you're going to continue to grow, they're going to do whatever it takes to keep you down. And sometimes that's due to immaturity and jealousy and things like that, or an inability to talk openly and in healthy ways about what they're feeling and their insecurities, and so they resort to unhealthy tactics to try to solve the problem, and it's not a healthy way to solve the problem. So it's different than typical abuse, but it
has ramifications.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Gaslighting.
Gaslighting is a big deal. And thankfully, it's become a common term lately in our culture. And it is for real. It is when, like I was saying, that mental manipulation, so that Gabby completely absorbed Brian's behaviors on her own. She completely believed she was at fault. She was the one to blame. And she was doing anything she could to protect him, while at the same time, behind her back, he's telling them a whole different reality. He's not only flipped it for Gabby, he's flipped it for the officers, flipped it for the public. Gaslighting is convincing someone that they're crazy because they don't know the truth of reality, and replacing that reality with a warped version of reality that they then believe is the truth. So it's so important to have a real truth sayer in our lives. Someone that you can go to and say, is this what happened? Or this, tell me, am I confused? Did I forget? Sometimes if we just have one clear voice of truth, whether that's a therapist, a minister, a parent, a sibling, a friend, somebody that you can trust in the community. The problem with systems of abuse is when you go and turn externally and try to start talking to someone about this, and they echo the gaslighting version of the truth, you are just lost in the spin. So if they make you doubt yourself and make you think he's such a good guy, he would never intentionally hurt you. All marriages have problems. It's not that bad. Just forgive and get over it. Those kind of messages keep targets in a lot of danger.
So be very, very careful how you counsel someone.
Very careful. Yeah.
And so now in gaslighting, and we don't know the details yet, but would you say gaslighting is also outside of Brian or an abuser? It's the other people, whether it's the family, the friends, who support and reiterate the false narrative.
They may not be doing it intentionally. They may really believe the false narrative too, just because that's what they see.
So they can be gaslit, and they're if you are gaslit, is it deception?
It's deception. So it's intentional deception. The person being gaslit actually saw the truth, but was made to question her own truth. She actually experienced it. She knows it, but they mess with your head and your memories so that you
distort reality.
You doubt your own truth and you replace it with their truth. The term comes from an old film where there was a woman in a movie, and her husband was turning on and off the gas lights intentionally. And she kept seeing this happen, and she was like, something's wrong. The gas lights are going on and off. And he kept telling her, no, you're crazy. But he was doing it the whole time, trying to make her doubt herself, doubt what she was seeing, doubt her reality, believe his reality. She ends up believing she's crazy. And so does everybody else. She's gone crazy. But he was making her look that way intentionally the whole time because he wanted to destroy her. That's where the term comes from. And that's exactly what it is. They play you and make you look crazy to the outside world, and even make you think you're crazy yourself. Because when you can't even know for sure that what you saw is what you saw, what's real anymore? What's real?
What a web. Wow.
It is a web. It is deep, dark stuff.
Dark and deep. Okay. Hovering.
Hovering it's a complicated term. It can mean they like to keep, it's a cat and mouse game. So they really want to keep you under their control. You have to understand too, you're talking about these young relationships. The boy might not even want that girlfriend. He just doesn't want anybody else to have her. He may not like her or love her at all, but to let her go and be happy and find love with someone else is just not, he's not capable of that, because she's his, at least it's, he owns that person. Mm-hmm. And so if she starts to get a little bit away and break away, he's going to kind of just keep hovering over her and keep her under his little paw and never really let her. I mean, he may not kill her, but that cat's just playing with that mouse for fun. Mm-hmm. You're mine. You're mine. You're not going to go free. It's kind of like that.
So those teen relationships that really don't end in the sweet forever love, but where it's like, why do they stay together? Yes. It's such drama. It's this, it's that, but then they're always back together. So it sort of means at least one is hovering. And then I would assume the other is enabling, which was my next. Is hovering only done when someone enables that?
Well, I'm very careful not to call the target an enabler or codependent. I actually don't like those terms. I think that puts the blame on the target. And in some situations, we have enablers, we have codependents, all of that. Usually the enablers are on the outside. There are codependent relationships where people kind of want a person to be broken so that they can help them. That's a whole different topic. Mm-hmm. Truly abusive relationships. There is an innocent target who is truly just trying to have a healthy relationship in the best way they know how. And the abuser is targeting them from the start to destroy them. So I don't, it's not really that the target is an enabler, if that makes sense.
Okay.
They are trauma bonded and locked in so that they keep trying to earn that. They don't realize that. They don't realize they're trying to earn a reward. It's all subconscious. It's just the only pattern of life that they know at that point, the only relationships. A lot of times it's the first real relationship they've had, or it's all they know from other relationships in their family systems. So it's normal. Yeah.
Well, what about, we just have a few more. Do you have?
Yeah. We're good.
Okay. Love bombing.
Love bombing is kind of like what you were saying with the gifting and all of that, but typically love bombing is used for the early stages of the relationship when they're building that trust. Mm-hmm. And they kind of come in and, like you said, they're that smooth talker. Mm-hmm. They put you up on a pedestal. They worship you. They think you're the best thing in the world they've ever seen. They would do anything in the world to have you in their life. You are just, they make you feel like the most special, beautiful, chosen person. And they are so in love with you. And you just can't believe that somebody could love you this much and see all this good in you. And they just wrap you in, they make you feel so seen and valued and cherished and loved. They bomb you with that positive energy. Yeah.
Well, most relationships start with infatuation. Can it be true infatuation, and can it be sincere? But it's the initial stages of what will end up being a very unhealthy relationship.
Infatuation is 100% normal and part of a healthy relationship. That's when it all gets tricky, right? Like, how do we know where to draw the line? Mm-hmm. So love comes in different phases, and it's chemical and biochemical and hormonal in those early stages for everybody to feel like, oh, bliss, because that's how we're made. That's how we're designed. The difference is an abuser is not really feeling that. The abuser is manipulating the whole situation and saying these rote phrases that they've learned from observing life. Mm-hmm. They don't have real emotions and feelings the way healthy people do. They truly do not know how to love and be loved. They cannot do it. They're not capable of it. They don't know how to feel. And so the only way they feel is by, it just sounds crazy, but like using other people's emotions to bounce off of. And so if they can get these emotional reactions off of you, even if it's pain, these strong, deep emotional reactions, then they finally feel something. And it makes them feel more normal and more human. And they're that desperate to feel something because they're dead inside.
Okay. You don't like the term, what is enabling? How do you like to use that? What is it?
Enabling is an important term. I just don't think the target is the enabler. The target can't enable her own abuse. So, yes. The enablers are the people, whether they are aware of it or not. And I think there are people who are intentional enablers, and there are people who don't know that they're being enablers. Mm-hmm. Let's say someone's in a bad relationship and they go to their best friend and they say, he was really mean to me last night. He was yelling at me. He threw a book at me, it almost hit my head. It went into the wall. Is that normal? Like, she's questioning, like, do all guys act like this? And the friend goes, I'm going to use the name Brian because that's what we're talking about. Brian, like, he's the nicest guy in the world. What in the world did you do to make him that mad? I can't even imagine him acting like that. So all of a sudden the target again questions herself. I must be the flawed person in this relationship. There must be something wrong with me. I've got to try harder to keep him calm, to keep him steady, to keep him stable. And there you are, you're locked in. And so is she going to go tell somebody else next time or question somebody else? No, because she feels ashamed because she's just been told the problem's her. And everybody loves Brian. He's a great guy. So you see how you get locked in? And then next time it's not a book, it's a bullet, and it just escalates.
Okay. On that point, and I wanted to, I'm going to circle. I've got two more terms. And then my very last question before I let you go is going to be, let me go ahead and ask it because it ties in with this. You said this is a piece of advice that someone just gave and they thought it was good advice. Well, he's great, or everyone has a bad day. So that reinforces the false narrative that that's healthy and that that's normal. If you are someone who, like, I know I'm capable of speaking truth clearly without fear of whoever, whatever. And there are many people out there, but my friend who's a 2, we were talking about this. We lead a small group of couples, and years ago, not our current group, years ago, we saw a couple and we saw the fear in her eyes, the demeaning things he would say to her. We tried to meet with her about it and wouldn't go there.
Yeah.
What would you tell people who they see something and they want they're willing to go the mile, but they're stiff-armed? Do you stop? Do you call someone else? Because it may end poorly. Yeah. So tell us to what length we go.
Well, I do think that it's just as with the abuser. You can't help somebody who doesn't want to be helped. You can't change somebody who isn't ready to be changed. And so if she's still in denial, it's a psychological defense mechanism to be in denial, to not want to let anybody in. There may be reasons. Maybe she knows she'll be in more danger if people know. Maybe her children will be in more danger if people know. Maybe you'll be in more danger if people know. And so she's found this little narrow lane to survive in, and she's making it work, and she doesn't want to tip the scales. There's a lot of really delicate issues that survivors have to dance around. And some of them find a way to survive in that lane until their kids are grown. Some don't. So if she reaches out to you for help, that's when we really need to know how to respond. And I think a lot of times we don't know what to say. I did write an article. It's on my website about 10 things not to say when somebody reaches out to you for help. I have a whole page on my website of domestic violence resources for people to find help. And there's some articles there that I've written on these topics. But, some of the things that I would recommend saying are, because a lot of us don't know how to help, and every situation is different. So we can say this: I don't know exactly how to help you, but I'm going to be with you at every step. I will help you find the help you need. I will help you find a counselor, an attorney, a safe space, whatever. Some people don't want to open their homes to a target because you have a family to protect too, and it really does put you in danger. And a lot of targets don't want to put you in that situation because they know that coming there would put you in danger. However, a lot of people do know of an empty rental house somewhere, or an empty condo, or an empty apartment that maybe they could find a way to give them a safe place to stay, that he doesn't know where they are for a little while until they can get some helpful resources in place. Because a lot of people don't have access to shelters. You'd be surprised how few there are in the world. And a lot of people just cannot go to a shelter. They're not always great places to be. There are a lot of rules and regulations with the age of your kids, the gender of your kids, your pets, situations like that. And a lot of people just can't do it psychologically. They can't.
They'll stay in an unhealthy relationship
because they don't see an out. So if you have those extra, empty spaces, or you can contact a minister that may know of one, or that kind of thing. Sometimes that's all it takes. A little bit of distance, a little bit of clarity away from that abuser. They can start clearing the fog, getting out of that gaslighting haze, breaking those trauma bonds, and figuring out what the real truth is. Seeing the truth is step one. Then they can find ways to start again. But seeing the truth is step one. And they have to have space and clarity in order to see that. And
to have that space away from the situation and the circumstances is the first step in them saying, hey, there's a different reality there's a reality that I've not seen.
Exactly. And in a lot of cases, when they finally get away, see, like in Mississippi, there's not even legal separation, which is a whole nother topic, but that's just insane to me, because you need to be able to get away into a safe space for a long period of time in a protected way, so that your fight or flight hormones can come down and you can start to realize what is danger. Because when you're living in longitudinal chronic abuse, you are on fight or flight mode all the time. So you can't even pick up those little danger signals. And some people have been in that their whole lives, so they couldn't read the signals. They couldn't read the radar when they were in danger. Breaking away from all of that and finding a peaceful, safe space just to sleep for a night, you wouldn't believe what a difference that can make in somebody's life. Just a little bit of clarity, a little bit of safety can make a difference. Otherwise, you're in survival mode all the time. All the time.
Well, Julie, I'm going to, as much as I hate to, I'm going to let you get to your next meeting. But what I'm going to do is link to, because we just had 2 more terms, and I'm going to triangulation and projecting. I'll get those terms from you. I'll direct everyone to your website, to all of your resources. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. This has been a wealth of very valuable information. So thank you, my friend. I'm very grateful to you.
Thank you for giving us time to talk about this important conversation and to fight the good fight. I appreciate you.
Absolutely.
Have a wonderful day. Thank you.
You too, Julie. Thank you.
All right. Bye.
Bye.